All righty, friends, welcome back to the Blessed Family Podcast. So excited to be with you today, and sorry once again that we've just been not coming at you once a week. That's our goal, but we've got a lot of ministry going on, but you guys are a huge part of our ministry, and so please forgive us, but know that if we don't come out with a podcast a certain week, you can always go back and look at previous episodes. We have over 100 of them, and we try not to just ramble in them. We try to have a specific teaching, a specific area of theology or family of your life to focus upon. So you can go back and hopefully you can glean something and be encouraged, be challenged. Well, in our last episode, we talked about 10 books that we would recommend. Hope you enjoyed that. We love talking books. Books are great. Man, I wish I had a head start earlier in my childhood on loving books. And you know what? Because that wasn't a part of my childhood, it's still hard to be the reader that I want to be, but I'm a work in progress, and our shortcomings can be victories for our children because we can use that to have our eyes open and to encourage them and challenge them. And so the next Dodd generation is definitely a step ahead of the game. Well, today we're going to talk about movies, films. Now, we do believe that films, movies, screens can be dangerous. I would recommend to you Colin Gunn's documentary Captivated, because you need to know what films do to your brain. And you know, it's not that it's a horrible thing, but at the exposure of 9 hours a day, which I think is commonplace in our culture, it can really be dangerous. And of course, it's scary because now young people ages, 2, 3, 4 are getting goggles. They're getting, these virtual goggles. They're getting iPads. I heard this is about a 8-year-old stat, maybe a 5-year-old stat, that one of the most popular gifts for 2-year-olds are iPads. Not sure if that's true. Maybe it's not, but I bet it's not too far off. So we need to know how to have a good biblical attitude towards films, towards documentaries, towards things on screens. I personally believe that you need to have a resource library in your home that is primarily books, and second, audios, and then third, at the top of the pyramid are a few good, selective, choice, picky preference films. Now, I have to confess, in my past, I've been tempted to go Amish on this topic and say, you know what, forget it. We're not doing films. We're not doing movies. We're not doing screens. And that's a very easy temptation to fall into, but I think it's throwing out the baby with the bathwater, because the technology is not the issue. The issue is the content and the culture. The issue is what is on the screen and how often we fix our eyes upon it. Because just to make a quick, important point, you can only watch good stuff and watch too much of it. So you need to, instead of running from it, you need to train your children on how to take dominion. They need to see screens and films as tools, not toys. And to say that, okay, these things aren't bad, but they can be. I mean, anything can be bad. Hey, you know what? Let me just challenge you. Reading the Bible can be bad. You say, "Oh my goodness, how?" Well, okay, I'm a dad. I'm a husband. I have a responsibility. What if I just read the Bible all day? I didn't work. I didn't earn income. I didn't speak to my family. You would say that's not good. And of course, the Bible isn't what's not good. It's being responsible with that amazing resource. It's the same thing with screens. Okay. It's about content. It's about time. And so instead of running from them, we need to train our children, because parents who don't train their children and just say, no, we just aren't going to have anything to do that, very often their kids get older, they leave home, they have freedom, and they go crazy because they weren't trained, and they overdose. They go to the opposite extreme and become film junkies. We don't want that either. So this will give you some ideas, hopefully, on how to choose films. Now, disclaimer, just because the Dodd family recommends it, please don't assume that it's going to be perfect content for every age of your family. No, we've got some things on this list that I wouldn't recommend your 8-year-olds watch. And I wouldn't recommend that any of your children or you watch until you've previewed it. So we're possibly going to disagree on some things. the point of this, just like in our last episode with the books, the point in this isn't for you to make this your top 10. It's to get you to think about films. Okay. It's to get you to think about films, to think about how they can be a tool, a resource for educating, equipping, inspiring, giving your children the right heroes. So how do you choose films? Well, what's the goal? If the goal is simply to be entertained, period, you're going to lose the battle. The goal has to be, once again, to build up and to educate. For instance, I want my children to have good heroes. Example, one of my favorite men of history is Winston Churchill. And so I've chosen a film that they watch. Now, unfortunately, there is a bad word in that film. And for a while, a few years back, I therefore said, no, we're never going to watch that. And I've changed. Now, you might say that was a bad call. Totally open to being corrected, totally open to being rebuked. Personally, though, I think for certain ages, it can be okay. I think Oliver Cromwell is a hero that I want my kids to have. I want my children to have a good sense of history and what it was like in World War I, World War II. So there's some films about that. And I don't want to give away my list before we get into it, but you need to say, okay, you need to list the objectives. What are we trying to accomplish? For my home, we're trying to educate them. And so if the film isn't educating them, you might want to rethink it. If it's not giving them good character, good history, good theology, good thinking, good inspiration, then it's not worth doing. Now, at the same token, and this is a very important principle, parents, you can find films that do have good things in them, and yet there's a whole lot of worse things. So, for instance, I've chosen, in this film I'm going to share with you in a minute about Winston Churchill, I've chosen to, even though there's one bad word, in my personal opinion, the good of the film outweighs that. But you don't want to make, okay, it outweighs it, be a license for absolute filth and garbage. So you need to be wise. Be wise. And if you don't have a peace about it, don't show it to your kids, because this can be a slippery slope. There's a family I know, amazing family, raising their kids right, and they started compromising with films, and it got out of control, and their kids aren't doing well. And I was visiting their kids. I walked in, and the oldest son had a movie library in his room, and I looked at the movies, and right there I knew, okay, this was one of the main veins of poison that came in. So you need to be very, very careful. Very, very careful. For instance, one of the movies on this, which I wasn't planning on showing this, but one of the movies on this boy's shelf was V for Vendetta, which completely promotes sexual perversion, sodomy, and all kinds of nonsense, all kinds of evil. That's not a good idea. Now, could there be some cool elements in that film? Sure. But you put it on the scale, it's not even close. I mean, look, if it's somewhere in the middle, weighing pros and cons, don't show it. The pros have to heavily overweigh the potential cons to even have it on a list to consider. And then you need to be wise. Now, let me also say this. There are films that my wife and I think could pass. And they're like, you know what, that could be good, but the potential pros aren't enough. We're like, you know what, they could watch this. It's not that bad. We think it could pass our criteria, but it's just not worth it. It's just not worth it because there isn't enough inspiration. There's not enough character. There's not enough integrity. There's not enough, something that's going to inspire and educate and fire up my kids for liberty, for truth, for godliness. There's not enough. So therefore, we aren't going to do it. So there are dozens and dozens and dozens of films which could pass in the Dodd home, but we don't do it. So we are very, very picky. As I'm recording this, I'm in our studio, and this is where we keep our movies. And they take up 2 small shelves. Nope, they take up 3 small shelves. And many of them are educational films that aren't even movies. They're just, Answers in Genesis films, for instance, which is a great resource. The best Science films I found are Institute for Creation Research. They have some amazing films that aren't movies, but they're educational. So a lot of, well over half of our DVDs, which in 10 years, DVDs probably won't even be a thing anymore, but over half of them are not movies. They're simply educational films. Okay, so let's get into our list of the top 10. Now, I did cheat a little bit, as I tend to do on these lists, because we're trying to cram in more than we have room for, but we decided to do 10. Okay, number 1, Gospel of John. Now, this one, I would say every family should watch, unless you have strong convictions about translations, which we, don't. But Gospel of John is great. It's verse by verse, the Gospel of John. How can you go wrong? It's verse by verse, the Gospel of John. Get it. Hey, guess what? You can watch it free on YouTube. Just YouTube, the Gospel of John HD, and you'll find it. Okay, so that's number 1, Gospel of John. Along with that, you could do books like the Gospel of Matthew. There's a Book of Acts video series that's quite old. They need to redo it. Things like that. And then, of course, there's the controversial ones, like, The Chosen. Some people like it, some people don't. There's the series of the Bible that came out about a decade ago. Some people like it, some people don't. But the Gospel of John, it's good. Okay, number 2. Okay, we cheated. We put 2 movies into one, and that is Gettysburg and Gods and Generals. Friends, now some of these movies I'm going to say, be careful, preview it. This one, no. You need to get Gettysburg. You need to get Gods and Generals. Our family is very excited because we just found out a couple of days ago that they have extended cuts of these, where it's an extra 20 minutes of Gettysburg and an extra hour of Gods and Generals. So we're just freaking out in a good way. But you need to get those movies. You need to watch them. And because they go together, and you can also get the books, which for Gettysburg would be the book Killer Angels, and Gods and Generals, same title. Excellent books, excellent films. Please, if you want to give your children a good understanding of the war between the states and about courage and about godliness, especially with Gods and Generals, you need to get those films. Watch them. I just sent them out to friends of ours in Wisconsin. Great gifts. Okay, this next one, number 3, you need a preview. It has bad biblical language. What do I mean by that? It has words that we don't want our kids to say, but they're words in the Bible. That doesn't mean it's right, but that's how I classify it. When I talk about language, it has bad language that's in the Bible. And it's the 1970 film Cromwell, starring Richard Harris, who was anything but a godly man, bless his heart. But Cromwell is good because we're fans of Cromwell. And in that movie, you'll see the character of Cromwell talk about biblical principles of life, biblical principles of the roles of the state, biblical principles of the roles of the church, and it's a really good film. But parents, please preview it first. So that's Cromwell, 1970. All right, next, number 4, also would have to say you have to preview this. There is one word in it that it's very unfortunate they put in there. It's foolish. Fortunately, the man who says it in the film has a thick sailor accent, and you really can't understand what he's saying. So we missed it the first 10 times we watched it. And that is the movie Master and Commander. Master and Commander. My boys are big fans of the author of Master and Commander. That'd be Patrick O'Brien. Now, the books, that's a whole different ballgame. The books you don't want your children reading until they're at least, I would say, 15, 16 years old, and you might not want them reading then. I am not recommending the books. I let my older boys read them, but I'm not recommending them to anyone else. But Master and Commander is a great film. It's a great film that teaches manliness. It teaches responsibility. It teaches courage. You have a young man on the ship, loses one of his arms. He's probably, 11, 12, and you see him play the part of a man. I mean, if you want to fire up your boys and give your girls a good example of what it means to act like a man, to show order, discipline, courage, manliness, there's definitely a Christian theme throughout it. Would encourage you to check that out, Master and Commander. All right, number 5. And this was hard because this morning and we've been working on this list, me and my kids and my wife, and it was hard to settle this and put it down on just 10, and I cheated. I did tweak it a little bit, but Master and Commander was definitely agreed by all. Number 5 is The Lord of the Rings, and we're going to throw all 3 of those because they're supposed to be one book, so we'll make them one film. The Lord of the Rings would recommend, of course, the extended special editions. I would say those are great family films. Now, there might be some scary elements for younger viewers. I only let my 5 olders watch them, and we only watch them once a year, shortly after Tolkien Day, which, of course, as you know, is Bilbo's birthday, September 22nd. I don't let my little girls or little Abraham watch them, but I think they're very good, healthy films that, once again, teach courage, manliness. The people who did them before Hollywood went woke. I don't personally recommend the Hobbit movies. Take it or leave it. I definitely don't recommend the nonsense that Amazon's been coming out with, trying to do, they take something as noble and amazing and incredible and godly as Tolkien, and they just don't have the integrity Peter Jackson did back shortly after the turn of the 21st century. And so they did a good job on that. So I would highly recommend The Lord of the Rings. Okay, next, number 6, we have a historical documentary of the men who built America. This was done by the History Channel. Believe it or not, they did an amazing job. It's called The Men Who Built America, Frontiersman Edition. There are 2 different Men Who Built America series. This is the one that goes back to Daniel Boone, Davy Crockett, Lewis and Clark, Kit Carson, and it is really good. It's a masterpiece. Honestly, I have bought and purchased and shipped so many of these for my friends. They're good. So this is one of the ones that I would say to you, no, you don't need to preview it. You need to get it and watch it. Now, there's some violence in it, so it might not be suitable for younger viewers, but if you have older children, I'd say ages 12 and up, maybe even 10 and up, they need to watch The Men Who Built America if you want them to understand the kind of men and the kind of women that made this nation strong. So that's one that I'm saying, get it. The Men Who Built America, Frontiersman Edition. Very important that you do the Frontiersman. Otherwise, you're going to be... The other one's good, but it's about Ford and... I can't think of their name. Rockefeller and Vanderbilt, people like that. Okay, moving along, number 7, we cheated. We just are going to say Kendrick Brothers movies. Now, are the Kendrick Brothers movies perfect? No, but just being honest, our family has really gotten a lot of enjoyment and encouragement out of them. So whether it's War Room, Courageous, Fireproof. I know that Doug Wilson, who I highly respect, has an issue with that film, but there's definitely things we can glean from it, and their movies are very family friendly. So I would say Kendrick Brothers. Of course, you could extend that to movies, not by the Kendrick Brothers, but kind of in that same genre, like I Can Only Imagine. And so there's some good films out there. Now I'm just going to go on a rant. Do You Believe? I think that's a good film. Case for Christ. You could throw in, well, why not? I've already broken all the rules. Let's throw in God's Not Dead. Some of those have some good things in them. My kids love the last one they did, which is all about homeschooling. I haven't watched it yet, but they watched it in the theater, said it was great. But yeah, check out some Kendrick Brothers films. Okay, number 8. This is the one. This is the one that I was speaking of earlier about Winston Churchill, and it's called The Darkest Hour. Darkest Hour. And when I watch it with my kids, I always give a high bleeping sound when they get to that one time that Winston says something funny yet a little crude. But that's a great film. If you want to give your kids a love for Winston Churchill, which I think is appropriate, I would highly recommend The Darkest Hour. Okay, number 9, we're going to cheat again, and we're going to just say good historical films. And we actually had a conflict. We couldn't decide whether we wanted to do history or Sherlock Holmes. Not the modern Sherlock Holmes. No. The black and white Sherlock Holmes, right? Which many of those you can get on YouTube. But the older stuff is better. The modern stuff I don't recommend at all. Of course, the books I would highly recommend. But we decided to go with history because history is, real. And so this would be The Great Escape. We love The Great Escape. Stalag 17, Lawrence of Arabia. The Guns of Navarone, which aren't based on truth, they're based on the novel, but still have historical elements within it. And once again, teamwork, courage, things like that. Okay, and last but not least, number 10. This was hard, but we ended up coming up with just, let's do Charlton Heston. So that would be El Cid. That would be the Ten Commandments. That would be Ben-Hur. And that's what's cool is going back to films, going back to a day and age where, for instance, I can put in the Ten Commandments. What is that, a 4-hour film? And I don't have to worry about my kids seeing inappropriate stuff. It's just going to be a good film. Same thing with El Cid. Same thing with Ben-Hur. So there you have it, folks. As of April 2023, those are the Dodd family top 10 recommended films. Now, there were some other films, many films that or not many, but a few that my kids were like, oh, we have to do that one. I'm like, no, we can't do that one because I just can't recommend that film, even though I let you guys watch it. You're like, ooh, what is it? I'm not going to tell you just because I like teasing you. Well, actually, okay. No, I'm not going to. Okay, I'll give you one. Last of Mohicans. Last of the Mohicans. That's a film that I let my older kids watch. There is some violence. Violence does not bother me that much. Language, I have an issue with. If it's strong on language, we aren't going to watch it, obviously. If it's dropping really bad words, we aren't going to watch it. And of course, sensuality, nudity, that is not an option. Like that completely makes it where it's not even on the list to consider. So nudity, sensuality, it's gone. Bad language, it's gone. Violence, it depends, but usually that's not for me personally a eliminator of films. It just comes down to language, and once again, if it has, like Cromwell does, the biblical bad language, I might allow it if I think it's worth it, and that's where we all are going to stand before God and give an account. But friends, I hope you think, or I hope this encouraged you, reconsider the films you watch. Back in 2013 or 2012, I can't remember when it was, but back then, maybe even a little earlier, 2010, my wife and I did a movie purge. We had hundreds of movies, and we got rid of 90% of them because we're like, you know what? Even though we've been watching these, we will never let our kids watch these, so what's the point? We're sending a message of hypocrisy. If it's not okay for mom and dad to watch, it shouldn't be okay for if it's okay for mom and dad to watch, then it should be okay for our older teenage children to watch. If it isn't, that's a problem. So you need to be consistent in that. All right, friends, as always, love you guys so much, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.